It's time for us to check back in with the thread that runs so true. If you've missed any of the previous readings, just look in the description below for a playlist. Saturday morning, I got up late and ate my breakfast after John Conway and all his children had gone to work. Bertha was the only one there, and she was silent. She fixed my breakfast and I ate. Then I took a volume of Kentucky school laws and went to the Lonesome Valley School and sat down on the brace root of a giant sycamore in the shade. The hot August sun had begun to climb up the sky, and the formless clouds of mist rose from the tobacco and corn up and down the valley. I began reading on the front page of the volume of school laws while Nancy Cochran came out on her store porch and picked her guitar and sang as she had never played and sung before. The only time she stopped singing and playing for me was when she had a customer. These times were few and far between. While Nancy entertained me, I found some interesting items in Kentucky school laws, a document I had never bothered to read before. I discovered that the use of tobacco was not only prohibited to pupils, but to patrons, and that visitors were not allowed to use this fragrant weed on school property at any time, at any school in the state. This was the law. I was also trying to find out whether a teacher had to board in the school district where he was teaching. I read the entire document through, and I failed to find such a provision. It was sometime in the afternoon when I finished reading these school laws. I was just getting ready to rise from the sycamore brace root and go back to Conway's when I saw a tall young man walk down the Lonesome Creek Road. He looked first to his left, then to his right. He looked toward the little store where Nancy sat playing her guitar and singing. He slowed down when he reached the schoolhouse. He turned and looked in every direction, even toward where I was sitting, but the sycamore tree partially blocked his view. Then he took off across the schoolyard to the boys' privy. I waited minutes for him to come out, but he didn't. I walked cautiously down to the privy, eased the door open. I found him, smearing the walls with vulgar pictures of me, Flossie Conway, and May Woods. "So you're the man doing this," I shouted. "You're the man I've been looking for." He threw his piece of chalk down and dashed for the door. I was standing in the right position to catch him, square on the chin with an uppercut. I gave the lick all I had. I know it sounds unbelievable, but it is true. I flipped this man completely over in the air, and he hit on his feet running. He ran from the toilet facing the road, but after I hit him, he was facing the toilet. He about-faced and was off like a rabbit. He didn't run toward the store, but he leaped the rusted strands of barbed wire toward the cornfield. I couldn't clear the fence. I had to go between the wires. And when I got through the fence, he was nearly to the tall, green-growing corn, and that was a good place for me to lose him. I had never seen a man who could run like this fellow. He had a pair of long rabbit legs, and he used them. He was off, and I trailed until I lost his footprints under the tall corn. Nancy Cochran had seen the chase. When I passed her store on my way back to Conway's, she said, "What were you trying to do to Alvin Purdy?" "Who is this Alvin Purdy?" I asked her. "Oh, he's a boy from Upper Lonesome, and he nearly worries me to death," she said proudly. "He tries to have dates with me. I won't have anything to do with him, though." I didn't tell her what he had been doing. I had never seen him before, nor had I ever heard of him until I found him fighting in his strange way. I later learned he was jealous of me. He was in love with Nancy Cochran. Nancy Cochran and Flossie Conway were old rivals. Each tried to take the other's beaus, and this was the direct reason for the ugly pictures of me in the school privy. Again, all the secret thoughts I had harbored in my brain about Guy Hawkins and Ova sailors proved false. Monday, I got my check for my first month's teaching, exactly $68. I knew then it was better that my going to see May Woods had turned out the way it had. It was better not to have a date with her. If I'd had a date with her and had fallen in love with her, I could never have shown her a good time and could not have driven her around in an automobile. For Bill Coffey, welder at the Auckland steel mills, even if he did have only a third-grade education, was 4 times as successful as I was, if success was measured in dollars and cents. And believe me, success was measured that way among the young people I knew in Lonesome Valley. If Bill Coffey had wanted to switch Mae Woods for Flossie Conway or Nancy Cochran, he could have. And I could understand why Mae Woods dated Bill Coffey. She perhaps, like my sister, was teaching school to buy herself clothes. Then why shouldn't she date Bill Coffey, who could drive her up and down Lonesome Valley Road in a green convertible almost too long to make the turns in the road? Why should she refuse to date a man who smoked 8-inch aromatic cigars, who wore silk shirts, flashy ties, the best tailored suits, and drove a big car? I didn't blame her. What could I show her on $68 a month? I was young too, and wanted to date girls and show them a good time. I was also fascinated by school teaching. I loved my profession. I was willing to learn it from the ground up. I knew I wasn't the perfect teacher. I knew there was much for me to learn. But why should I follow this profession? It was in the 20s and times were good. America was booming. There had been months when I followed my trap lines and lived at home and went to Lansboro High School that I had more than $50 a month. There had been months in the spring when I dug roots and sold them that I had made over $30 a month. After I had paid my board, how much would I have left? How much more would I make teaching school than I would make going to school, supporting myself by hunting and trapping in the autumn and digging wild roots in the spring? I didn't have long to wait to know how much I would have left. Bertha Conway charged me $25 for a month's room and board, and I knew this was reasonable compared with the times in our country, but it was not reasonable compared with my salary. I had only, not counting the little things I had bought for my pupils and my school, $43 left. My having to pay Bertha Conway $25 a month for room and board was not the reason I was leaving Conway's. There were other reasons. It was all right as long as I corrected Guy Hawkins, but when I disciplined Veda, it wasn't all right. Also, my trustee was peeved at me for suggesting consolidation of rural schools. "Remember, I'm not trying to keep you here," John Conway said when I packed and ready to go, "but you do have to stay in this district." "Who said?" I asked. "Mr. Conway, I'm leaving here a copy of the Kentucky school laws. I've marked only one place for you to read." Then I was off, down Lonesome Creek Road to the valley, for I had met the man, and I had already seen the house where I was to stay. I'd seen my room. It wasn't a blind date this time. I knew the people, and I knew where I was going. I was going to stay with Uncle Amos Batson, who ran the store and post office at the valley. I would be 5 miles from my school and have to walk 10 miles each day, but I would be away from the 2 factions that composed the people of my school district. The score was evened in the minds of both groups, for I had disciplined Guy Hawkins, whose father belonged to one faction, and Veda Conway, whose father belonged to the other. Each group knew now that I didn't show partiality. I was there to teach school. That was all. I was determined to stay until my school year was finished. I wouldn't be whipped. I'd stay until the job was done. I could do it better and not live with either faction. If I continued to live in the Lonesome Valley School District, I would have to live in a home where the people belonged to one faction. There was no middle ground. My sister had told me this, and she was right. I had learned in my brief experience that a school teacher must keep himself above the petty bickering or prejudiced groups in his school community. There were 12 rooms in Uncle Amos Batson's 2-story white frame house. There were only 3 people in it. Uncle Amos and Aunt Effie had the downstairs, and I had all of the upstairs I wanted. There were 6 large rooms upstairs with screened windows and feather beds. The house didn't have a bathroom, but it did have running water downstairs. It was the best house in this section of Greenwood County. I wondered why I hadn't found it before. I could raise my windows. My room was cool enough, so I had to sleep under cover and not naked on top of the covers. and I didn't have to fight insects all night. The place was roomy and comfortable, and the food was delicious. I had never eaten better hot biscuits, 3-year-old hickory smoked ham, and wild honey in all my life. This was the place. And I was not without music. Uncle Amos Batson, though 67 years old, could draw a fiddle bow the smoothest I'd ever heard. He could make his fiddle talk, laugh, or cry. He could play music that made Aunt Effie put her long-stemmed pipe aside and dance. The first evening I spent in their home, she danced to her husband's magic fiddle. Though she was 67 too, the mother of 11 children, all married and moved away, she was as agile as a sparrow. She danced the old reels, her small feet nimbly tapping the tune that Uncle Amos played on his magic fiddle, fast as snow-melted water poured over the cliffs in an early mountain spring. My 5-mile walk to school up Lonesome Valley was a pleasant one. The morning sun in Lonesome Valley was like a golden sunflower in a deep, upturned bowl of blue. In the afternoons, the Lonesome Valley sun was a wilted sunflower in a shallow, upturned plate of blue. These were pleasant walks and gave me just enough exercise. The first week I lived at Batson's, something happened. Uncle Amos's hired man, Bill Strickland, didn't show up to milk Uncle Amos's 7 cows, for Bill Strickland had followed Bill Coffey to the Auckland steel mills without telling Uncle Amos he was going to quit. Uncle Amos didn't have anybody to milk his cows. Though he could play the fiddle, he couldn't milk a cow. Aunt Effie said she hadn't milked a cow in the 49 years she had been married, and she didn't plan to start now. Then I volunteered to go after the cows and to milk them. Uncle Amos knew I would have to hurry if I did all this and got to school on time. He hurried to the barn and saddled and bridled Sundance, his large white pony, and I climbed into the saddle. I was off to get the cows up a twisting cow path that curved right and left until it reached the mountain top. There were hundreds of acres of grassy slope, gentle and rugged, dotted here and there in the deep hollows and ravines with tracks of giant trees. There were 400 acres in this pasture. Below this mountain pasture lay the valley. I could see the winding stream, like a silver ribbon in the early morning sun, flowing gently past the farmhouses through the fertile level land where grew corn, cane, and tobacco. The dew was rising up in shapeless forms between the green valley and the sun, rising up and up, grotesque and beautiful. I sat for a moment in the soft saddle looking at this miracle of beauty while Sundance pranced, pawed, chomped at the bridle bits. He was restless to go after the cows. This large, intelligent, and beautiful pony, the color of an early morning sunbeam dancing on the Valley Creek waters below, knew more about finding the cows than I did. He knew what his mission was. He had been after the cows before. I gave him the rein, and he found the cows. When the cows saw Sundance, they were ready to start home to be milked. All but one. She was a white cow. She wouldn't follow Sundance. But when the other 6 cows started to follow him, leaving this white cow alone, she began lowing mournfully and soon came running in close pursuit. I never knew a white pony could lead cows before. It didn't take me too long to milk the 7 cows, for I set the big bucket under the cow and used both hands with full speed. Then I strained the milk and separated the cream for Aunt Effie to put in cans to ship on the Old Line Special. When I was through with my work, I didn't have time to walk 5 miles to school. I would be late, and I knew there would be talk, since I had left the Lonesome Valley District if I were late once. "Ride Sundance to school," Uncle Amos said. "Put him in Charlie Abrams' barn during the day." And that's what I did. After I had milked his cows once, strained the milk, and separated the cream, Uncle Amos didn't try to get another man to do the milking and going after the cows. I loved Sundance. I loved to ride him up the Lonesome Valley Road in the morning when the dew had laid the dust and when the corn tossels and morning glories vining up the corn were so alive with pink, blue, purple, and white horn-shaped blossoms They were good to smell and beautiful to see, for the drops of dew still clinging to them beamed like sparkling jewels in the early morning sun. The world was beautiful, and I was a school teacher with a big white pony to ride. In the afternoon, when I mounted the saddle for home, Sundance was anxious to return to his barn in the valley and wanted to run like a fox. I had to hold a tight rein to slow him. He was fast, young, and powerful, and it was only a matter of minutes for us from school to the valley. My second month at the Lonesome Valley School, I enjoyed the cooperation of the two factions. Living in a home that didn't belong to either faction worked satisfactory. I had never shown partiality to anyone, and my pupils understood. They went home and told their parents how fair I was with everybody, that I treated them all just the same. Dawn Conway held no malice toward me, and even Veda soon forgot what I had done to her. She didn't chew any more tobacco, not after her father had read the section of Kentucky school law I had marked for him, and he didn't say anything about my leaving Lonesome Valley School District. There wasn't much he could say anyway, for I became too popular with the patrons of my school district for one man to do much against me. I had made the community news too many times for them not to know me. I had made mistakes, small mistakes. One was the night I tried to reach Upper Lonesome. They knew I was human, that I was a man in their midst, trying to do something for their children. But this was not all. During our second month in Lonesome, we started applying arithmetic to problems in the community. Bert Eastman had told almost every man in Lonesome Valley about my figuring up the bushels of coal on his wagon bed. Now they came for me to figure wagon loads of coal, bushels of corn in the bins, sizes of coal houses, how much dirt to remove from a cellar or a well. And I never refused a request. If it was a small job, we did it after school. If it was a large one, we did it on Saturday. I took with me as many boys and girls as wanted to go along. Dawn Conway was always with me. Guy Hawkins became very much interested in figures and what could be done with them. When he got interested, his bosom friend and companion, Ova Sailors, did. One of my pupils, a large 12-year-old boy, Denver Likens, who was in the first grade and could count in his head with figures fast as I could, always went along. He couldn't write figures because he hadn't gone to school more than 3 months in his life. I gave him special attention because he was so interested. I held his hand at the blackboard and helped him make figures, starting him with figures from 1 to 10. Yet he went with us to figure land, corn bins, coal houses, everywhere that we were called to figure and calculate for the patrons of our district. We started applying arithmetic, and the people loved it. One Saturday, we figured the number of acres in Tim Conley's farm. Denver Likens carried the rod pole while Dawn Conway kept tally of the number of rods. Guy and Ova blazed a trail along the line fences so we could measure on the line and measure correctly. We figured the small farm to have 48.6 acres. When the county surveyor, Don Shackelford, 2 weeks later ran a survey, he figured the farm to have 48.7 acres. We were that accurate. We had come that close. But one of the funniest things to happen was in early September when a small man by the name of Silas Higgins came to Lonesome Valley School to ask me to figure a pasture field where he had cut the sprouts. He said he was to receive $6 per acre cutting the sprouts, and the fellow he'd cut the sprouts for, Willis Hager, had measured the land and he had measured it. He said that he had measured it for 12 1/2 acres and Willis had measured it for 6. He spoke loudly so all the pupils in my school could hear. Guy Hawkins said somebody was wrong, said that was too much difference. Don Conway said he would like for all of us to measure it. We told Silas Higgins we'd be there that afternoon at 4 o'clock. When we got there, Don, Guy, Ova, Denver, and I, the 2 men, were waiting and arguing. Willis Hager must have been 7 feet tall. Silas was not much over 5 feet. Willis would look down at Silas and laugh sarcastically and threaten to pick him up by the neck and seat of the pants and throw him from the field if he didn't accept his measurement. They had stepped the distances around the field, counting each step for 3 feet, 5.5 steps for a rod. My pupils began laughing. Willis was so tall he could step 6 feet at a step, and Silas so short he couldn't step 3. We didn't do any stepping. We measured the land, and Don Conway figured it while Ova, Guy, and Denver looked on. He figured the field for 9.6 acres. Willis wouldn't have their figures. He wasn't satisfied at all. Silas was better satisfied. These men even threatened each other physically and with the law. Then I went over the figures. Don had figured it correctly. "You see, Mr. Higgins, your legs are short," Ova Sailor said, "and your steps are not long enough." "Mr. Hager," Ova laughed until he shook as he looked up at the tall man, "your steps are too long. That's why you measured this field for only 6 acres. Willis Hager was going to hit me with a sassafras stick when I told him if he went to the law that he would lose, and our measurement was approximately what a surveyor's measurement would be. But he didn't get very far with the stick. 4 of my pupils stepped forward, and little Silas Higgins picked up a rock. Willis knew the odds were against him, and he settled down and listened to reason. Before we had left, we had the dispute settled, and both parties were satisfied. They shook hands and made friends. I have often thought if a little simple learning and arithmetic hadn't been applied here, one of these men would have killed the other before a lawsuit was filed in court. My pupils were seeing the practical appliance of simple learning to everyday problems. Don Conway became so interested in school that he decided not to get married but to go through the Lonesome Valley School, then on beyond Lonesome Valley to high school, and then beyond high school to college. His brain and his heart were fired with enthusiasm for more education. His enthusiasm caught on with the other boys who had once thought of running the teachers off. Now they were the most loyal and finely behaved pupils I had in school. Instead of wanting to tear down everything and leave a path of destruction behind them, they were constructive and wanted to build and help shape their own lives differently and that of their community. We'll stop right there for today. Another really interesting, I've dropped my bookmark, another really interesting part of the book. The beginning part, I really loved all this part. I wrote down lots of things I wanted to say about it, but I love that beginning part where he leaves the Conways. If you remember, they were mad at him because he'd spanked Veda, give her a paddling for chewing the tobacco and spitting on the wall. And so he left them that morning, and he took the book and he went and sat on the big sycamore tree, just the way he described it. Wouldn't you have liked to have seen it? He was sitting on the brace root, he called it, of the big sycamore tree with his book, and then the mist he could see rising up, and then you had Nancy Cochran down the road there at the store on the porch playing and singing, and I'm sure she's trying to get his attention. I think maybe she had a crush on Jesse, but such a beautiful, perfect scene there. I really loved that. This is in this part that we read today, you can really see and hear Jesse's beautiful writing, the descriptive part of it. And then Alvin Purdy, he was in there, he found out just because he'd went and sat there, just so happened he got to see who was leaving those vulgar pictures that he'd already cleaned up once, And so he got to chase him. That would have been a sight to see too, him running and chasing. Said he'd never seen nobody could run like a rabbit like that. But interesting, again, Jesse keeps admitting that all these bad things that happened, like the tobacco on the wall, which turned out to be a girl, be Veda, not Ova and Guy. But even this, he figured deep inside that it was probably Guy and Ova doing the bad drawings on the bathroom walls. Turned out it wasn't them. So I like how he keeps fessing up, like, my judgment was wrong. He was putting all that stuff off on them, and they really hadn't done any of it. Now, Guy did whip him, or try to whip him. Jesse whipped him, but he did do that. But the rest of it, they weren't guilty of any of it. So that's really interesting. And then he got to move, I guess, uptown in a way, thinking about a better place to live, but also technically uptown. He went to, it's like the little town there. It wasn't really a town, but little center of the area where there was a post office and the store with Aunt Effie and Uncle Amos. And he, just the way he described it sounded like a beautiful house, but it was so nice because he had the upstairs all by himself, and there were screens on the windows so he could open up all the windows. And then the first time since he'd come to Lonesome Valley, he actually needed a sheet. He got kind of chilly at night instead of just laying there sweating. And then the way he described Uncle Amos and Aunt Effie, you just loved them, that good food. And then the music, the fiddle, he said that Uncle Amos could make the fiddle, he said, talk, laugh, or cry. I really loved that. I love fiddle music, and I used to say that I wish someone just go around with, everywhere I went, I'd just have somebody playing the fiddle everywhere I went. Well, that turned out to be Katie. She's not getting to play quite as much right now, but I love fiddle music. I'm just crazy over it. I love all the old fiddle tunes, and I do love how the fiddle can be so emotional. It can sound like it's talking or laughing or crying. It can be so mournful. So I really, really loved that. And then Aunt Effie, that she was, the one song that he played, she jumped up and done her a little jig there, and he was talking about she was spry as a sparrow. I hope I'm like that. I hope I get to be spry as a sparrow. I know everybody, when you get older, aches and pains, and you have more likely to have health ailments, but that's my goal, is to be spry and agile as a sparrow in my older age. I hope so. But even in that, he had that beautiful language all the way through this. But he said, snow-melted water poured over the cliffs in an early mountain spring. Isn't that beautiful? Really beautiful writing. And then continued with, once he got there and started spending the night with them, then, staying with them, not just spend the night, but Uncle Amos's man that milked the cows quit. Thankfully, Jesse knew how to milk cows, so there he just stepped right into that job, and then it turned out to be great, because then he ended up getting to ride Sundance to school. But that walk, that first morning when he went after the horses, the horse ride, not really a walk, he went after the cows on the horse, but that first ride, he described it again, that beautiful, deep, like a sunflower in a deep upturned bowl of blue, and then in the afternoon it was like a wilted flower, upturned plate, I think he said, not bowl, but just beautiful descriptive writing. I just love it. I can just see it and smell the smells and hear the sounds. And wouldn't you have liked to have seen that? So he described going after the cows he said it was a trail that went to the right and then the left and the right and the left all the way to the top of the mountain, and it was 400 acres. Could you just imagine seeing that beautiful, beautiful land? And like I said, then it turned out to be a gift that he got to milk the cows, since he knew how, and Amos didn't. And Effie said she wasn't about to start now. She wasn't going to start milking no cows. And then he, in return, they kept letting him drive or ride the ride the horse, ride the pony. I don't know why I keep getting the horse, the pony, and the cow mixed up. Anyway, that turned out to be a real gift to him, and a gift to them too, because he just so happened that Jesse knew how to milk a cow, and that wasn't no problem to him, and how to separate the milk and the cream and do it all. So that really turned out to be a good thing for both of them. And then that beautiful descriptive language and writing continued on the first day when he did ride the pony to school. And just the way he described it was like with the corn and the morning glories growing up through the corn, and the dust. It wasn't dusty on the road because the dew overnight had laid the dust, and then he could see the little dewdrops on the corn and on the morning glories. They look like jewels. Just such a beautiful, beautiful descriptive language. Now, I've seen those beautiful mornings, so that's really speaks to my heart. Of course, he's not here in North Carolina, but it's much the same, though, much the same. It's amazing the heavy dews that we have here in the mountains. One thing is, I'm sure causes it is because we have so much moisture, and then that creates such a heavy dew. But a lot of times the dews are so heavy, it's almost like it did rain overnight, like it had rained a little bit, or come a little good shower, and it's just dew. So I love that part. And then I'm so excited about me and Matt growing corn this year. And one of my favorite things about the corn, of course, is getting to eat it. But cornfields are just magical places, and the ones I played in as I was growing up, or I was in as an adult, you can always find morning glories. They find their way in, and they're growing up through the corn, and the beautiful different colors, and just makes it really, really magical. And here in Wilson Holler, when I was a girl walking to catch the school bus every morning, I had to walk on past Granny's on down the hill down to where the state road ended. That's how far we had to walk to my uncle's house. And my grandparents before that, but my uncle moved into their house after my mama died. Anyway, there was a garden there, and so if you walked along the road, if you didn't go cut through the trails through the yards, then I remember the morning glories just growing wild through there. And sometimes, I don't know if somebody taught me this or if I just did it, but I would pick them, and then I would, because they're like a little trumpet, put it up to my mouth, and if you breathe in, then it would just, it would like suction around the edge of your mouth. Just something silly doing as a kid. But Jesse's descriptive writing there, I thought, I've seen those places before. Now, I've not seen where he's talking about, but I've seen places in the mountains just like that right here in my mountain holler. So I really, really loved that. And then the funny story at the end there that we read, it's wonderful that he, in the previous reading, it was how he realized play is how he's going to teach these kids, especially the little ones, how he's going to get them to learn and be interested in it is through play. That was going to be his, the way he was going to help them in all areas, everything, all the learning, because he has so many kids and so many different levels that he's got to worry about. But also, in this one, this is just another way that he's really getting them interested, especially those that he mentioned was Ova and Guy and the Conway boy, Don, and then Denver, the one that could count in his head but didn't know the real numbers. But to do arithmetic for people in the community. Now that's so smart because it helps not just those. I'm sure he went over these things in class and everybody got to learn. Everybody that was, paid attention got to see, oh, that's really great. I could figure out how much corn is in my daddy's crib or whatever it was. But also he really made inroads, I guess, if you will, into the community where they all began to appreciate him and what he was doing because they were seeing it firsthand. They were seeing it firsthand in their fields and their corn cribs and their wagons and all that. They were seeing firsthand, oh, well, this is beneficial. This is helping, helping me out a lot. And I'm glad he's teaching these kids that. So that's really amazing that he took the school actually to people's houses, if you will. I mean, he wasn't taking the whole school, but he was taking that process of learning to all these fields and houses and wagons. And I'm sure some people come to him, just like the gentleman that had that started all that with the coal wagon. Anyway, but there at the end, the people he was trying to help, Silas Higgins, he was the short man, and then Willis Hager was the tall man. And funny that immediately his pupils, his students there realized, well, no wonder you're getting two different measurements. You're so short and you're so tall. Your legs, you're just walking it off. And if you've ever been with somebody that's really tall, they can walk so much faster than you. Matt is like that. If I'm walking with Matt, he takes about two of my steps every time he takes a step. He's got long legs and they just stretch out. So that was really interesting that even the students noticed right off that's what was going on. But it was funny, though, that Mr. Hager, he got so mad about it that he picked up a sassafras stick and was going to hit Jesse with it. Well, then the shorter man, Higgins, and then all his students stepped up and was kind of like, no, you're not. You're not going to do this. You're going to have to take all of us on. And so then he calmed down and realized he better just accept that the measurement. And the measurement was kind of in between what both of them was saying, so it was kind of fair. I think Mr. Hager there was trying to get himself a deal, or maybe he just refused to understand that his legs were that much longer. I don't know. Really interesting, though. I hope you enjoyed this part that we read today as much as I did, and I hope you'll leave me a comment and tell me what jumped out at you. And as always, I hope you'll drop back by next Friday. We've got to see what he gets into next.